I've been playing Rise of Kingdoms for the last 5 years, and I've seen and done a lot of things in this game. In fact, for every game that I've played, there's always people who take things too far. And that's what this video is going to be about. Some of the things that you can do in this game that are maybe going a little bit too far, but nothing's stopping you from doing it. For example, I will share with you a technique that can get your kingdom 1.2 billion T4 troops per year for free to fight on your behalf. If that sounds a little bit crazy, stick around in this video because we're going to cover troops, resources, account uptime, rally garrison, and more. Hello, my friends, and welcome back. I'm Chisgule Gaming, and for every meta, the most effective tactics available, there's always people that will push that meta to its extremes. And this video will probably completely change your perspective on how to play the current meta in Rise of Kingdoms. And the bigger your kingdom is by power, the more likely you will face these meta tactics. In fact, I just finished up a KVK against 1960 and 1093, two of the biggest and strongest kingdoms in the game. And I learned a lot about what it looks like when you push some or all of the things we're going to talk about today to their limits. Now, again, if you want to avoid players and kingdoms that are using and abusing meta tactics, then consider being in a smaller kingdom. At the end of the day, life is unfair, and so is KVK registration. And if you look at the way that things worked out in our KVK here, right, like the power of each of the war camps is very obviously very different. Okay, 1093 is at a different but similar, actually, power level to 1960. And then all the other camps in this KVK were at just a dramatically, in my opinion, lower power level than those two war camps. All right. So if we know that KVK registration is not going to make each war camp equally powerful, and honestly, that would be very, very, very difficult to do. Like if they could just wave a magic wand and that would be so, then they probably would have done that. But just mathematically, just for clarity, right, around the differences here. I know when we were going into this KVK, our war camp's domain power was 30 billion. So all the accounts we registered for KVK, which is a thing that happens when your kingdom's big enough. We were 30 billion. 1960 was around 50 billion. That's 20 billion power difference. Still both one war camp, okay? But like obviously the power level of the war camps is different, is what I'm trying to say. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that although the power of each of the camps can be different, the thing that you hope for is that diplomacy has people leading toward a fair and balanced KVK where basically there's two sides with equal chances of winning. What I think most kingdoms ultimately go for is a good but winnable fight. So a fight where they think they've got a 60% chance or better of winning. That is how I think most Diplo goes, quite frankly. And the mystery is in some of the things we're about to talk about, and also there's just a lot of unknowns when it comes to Diplo, all right? But the first thing I want to talk about when it comes to meta tactics is actually farms and farm troops. Now I'm going to make my way over to my farm, which is way too high power. But with the domain system that developers put into the game recently, where you register 800 accounts, remember this only happens if your kingdom is of a certain size, but even without domain registration, this is going to matter. But if you can bring 800 accounts, well, gee, I mean, most kingdoms are only one alliance or two alliance. So what are the other 650 accounts that are a part of this domain registration, right? So if I go over here, I can show you the domain registration, right? All right, this is the domain registration. We're currently, I guess, 24 billion power. At the time of registration, we were 30 billion power. But if you've got 150 main accounts, then you can bring 650 farm accounts. And you may think, well, what's the significance of 650 farm accounts? Well, remember, I killed 9.4 million troops on my farm. But the thing that you need to think about is scale. People have made fun of this in the past. I like to think at scale. They say, don't think about, event rewards that way. And it's like, no, you should think about event rewards this way because scale is everything. So let's talk about this. If you have 650 farms, how many troops can a farm train per day? Well, I chatted with Abe, and he's got like 24, 26 farms. Something absolutely insane. The number is, I feel like it's always going up. But he said that it would be pretty reasonable to assume you could train 5,000 relevant troops per day on your farm. That's infantry, cavalry, and archers, okay? Forget the siege. Just relevant troops, forgetting siege, 5,000 troops per day. All right, well, 5,000 troops a day, that's not that big a deal, right? But when you multiply that by 650 accounts, okay, that's 3.25 million T4s per day that your kingdom could be producing. Let me say that again. A one alliance kingdom should, in a perfect world, be producing 3.25 million T4s on farms that they bring with them into KVK. Now that's per day. You see, if you have 60 days between KVKs, not even including the time in the KVK, which is about 60 days, you train about 195 million T4 troops. Again, double that if you count the time that you're in KVK, approximately, right? KVKs are more like 50 days long. But like just in your downtime between KVKs with those farms, you can get 195 million T4 troops. That ain't bad. For free, cost you nothing. Free, no speed ups. That's not even doing anything on these accounts. You log in, you hit train the troops, you collect your resources in here, you pick Spain for passive resource generation, you level up these buildings as high as you can, and you may even have some spillover resources you can send to other accounts, okay? That is how you can get 195 million T4 troops passively trained per KVK, except you can break that even further. Because you see, with domain registration, you pick what accounts are going into KVK. You choose. So what you can do is, if you enter 4 KVKs per year, let's say, why not have 4 times as many farms? That way, every KVK, you bring a farm in once per year. That farm rotates in. Well, now, if you're passively training troops all year long, and you have 650 accounts doing that, that's almost 1.2 billion tier 4 troops per year that you can bring into a KVK. Now, you need to keep those accounts much lower power than what I've done here, right? This account is 60 million power, but it was like almost, like 100 million power because I was told, hey, train up troops on this thing. We need you to train up troops. So I did. I should go to here we go, info section. What was my highest? 96 million power almost on this damn thing. Okay. But the point I'm trying to make is that the bigger kingdom you're fighting, the more of this they're doing. When we fought against 1960, their rule for the majority of KVK, even going into Kingsland, was kill your farm troops, kill your farm troops, kill your farm troops. Don't even send your main troops to die if you can avoid it, I think. I'm not in their kingdom. I don't know the exact rule, but that's what I had heard. And it would make sense. They would run rallies using only tier 4 troops. They would literally take as long as they wanted, but get all tier 4 troops to seed rallies at the start, okay? And I don't know if they did that with garrisons as well, but like the point I think is pretty clear. Like as much as possible, leverage farm troops instead of main troops, and it's basically free to you, assuming you want to take the time to go and do that. But the bigger the kingdom is, the more likely they are to want to take the time. So if you don't like that tactic, avoid the bigger kingdoms. Or if you want to just nudge your kingdom in the direction of being more meta, do a little bit of these things, right? Like I have one farm, ABES 26. Like the more you have, the more you can help your kingdom. And there's more to this, by the way, which is that when a big pass opening happens, your main account needs to be going and fighting places. So it's actually super advantageous to have multiple accounts that you can bring farms into the coalition and fill flags that are building. It seems dumb, but like somebody's got to build the damn flags. And in a one alliance kingdom, you're choosing between, is my main account March that I have worked on my crystal tech for going to be field fighting, or is it going to be building the flags? Somebody has to build the damn flags. And so the more that can be done with farms instead of mains, obviously the better. Now, this can be done, by the way, with multiple devices, or what I have done historically is you can be logged into the same account, okay, on like an iPad or an Android device, or I think a PC at the same time. I don't know if you can be logged into 3 things at the same time, but definitely at least 2 is what I'm typically doing. Either my Android device or my iOS device and PC, I think. I don't know. Typically, it's just for me, my iPad and my PC. All right. So that's how I can be playing my farm on one screen and my main account on the other. All right. And I'm telling you, that farm meta, like if you push that to its limits, okay? And again, every player had, you register this KVK, there's 650 farms, 150 mains. That's insane. Plus, by the way, I think there's a way to make this sort of work such that you get 899 accounts. I don't know the details of how to do that, but like you could technically have even more farms. You actually can get even more in for this, which is insane. 1.2 billion troops almost per year, passively trained, chilling, free. Okay, just takes time. So from here, let's talk about resources. All right, we're talking about farms. Let's talk about resources. So obviously, with all those farm accounts, you could be farming and sending those resources to your main account. But what I will say is that obviously the most expensive way to get resources is to buy them from here. The cheapest way to get resources is to farm them up yourself. And the bigger the kingdom is, the more systems they have at play for getting their players resources. I mean, this could be as simple as having an alliance bank, as an example. But if you don't have lots of resources, then you may want to avoid bigger kingdoms which have systems for getting lots of resources. So for example, when I scouted 1960 players in this KVK, people were shocked because they had over 10 billion resources each open. Okay, every player I scouted, it's like over 10 billion resources each. The bigger the kingdom is, the more likely they are to have a minimum required open resource count for playing in KVK. This is actually a thing, okay? And I think in 1960, maybe they even look at pictures of like, show me your resources. I don't know if it's actually true. I'm not there. I just hear rumors, okay? So maybe that's a rumor, maybe it isn't. It doesn't even matter. The point that I'm trying to make is that if you are not going to have lots of resources and do what you need to do to have those resources, you should be in a smaller kingdom to avoid that meta tactic. Look, I mean, the bigger players in this KVK had more than 50 bill of each open, okay? And once I did that, people understood much more what the logic was behind like, oh, right. So that's the reason that you guys shouldn't just run it down in the open field stupidly against these guys, because you're never going to drain them. There's no way your kingdom is doing that better than their kingdom. That would be dumb to do that and just fight stupidly against them. Not to mention the fact that there were many other advantages that they had, all right? So resources, we've covered farm troops. Now we need to cover account uptime, all right? The bigger the kingdom you go to, the more people play. It just is what it is. Like, I'm online with my account for like at least 16 hours a day when I'm in KVK. But in this KVK, you'll notice that there are people that seems like they're online 24 hours a day, okay? And you can even look at the honor accumulating around the clock, AoE barb farming, 24 hours a day almost, it would seem. And so if you're not willing to play a lot, you should be in a smaller kingdom, right? The way you can increase your punch in a KVK is to have more resources available so you can fight more, to have more troops you can fight with, which we've covered. But then, of course, the piece of the puzzle we're talking about now is those accounts need to be online, okay? So if you're not someone who wants to spend lots of time being online, go to a smaller kingdom. I know that it's tempting as a bigger, higher power player to be in a large kingdom because like there's a lot of reasons why that's very fun, but just keep in mind, you're going to be up against people that are online a lot more than you might have expected. The final thing I want to talk about, the truth about Rise of Kingdoms, is the Rally and Garrison meta. And the Rally and Garrison meta is way different than it's ever been, both with the release of the armament system and the updated iconic tiers. Now the rallies and garrisons are more differentiated than ever. And the good news, bad news is that yes, actually the incremental gains dramatically improve your performance. The bad news is that now, if you're not like the best in your kingdom, and there's only one thing getting rallied or one thing that you need to rally, you like shouldn't be that garrison captain. You shouldn't be that rally. It should be the best in your kingdom. And the result difference between the best and the second best, or even just like the best and the people who used to garrison and play that role, it's so astronomical. It is jaw-dropping. Like, it is the difference between we're 2-for-1ing you to now we're getting 2-for-1. And it's shocking. Like, we're really only talking about a small number of things with your formation and a small number of things with your equipment, but it like all adds up to just be dramatically different. And like, we observe this, let me say that differently. I observed this fighting against 1960, where it was like, man, we had people who used to Garrison captain, and like, when they get into that spot, like the reports are not as good, and it's like sucks, but like, yeah, no, you need to have the stuff. So the smaller kingdom you're in, the more opportunity you have to rally in Garrison. All right. And it's weird because you've heard me say that phrase like multiple times. Like, if you don't like these things, just go to a smaller kingdom, because at the end of the day, bigger kingdoms are just more competitive. The more power that's in the kingdom, the tougher opponents that you're fighting, the more people are generally willing to do to go and actually get the win. And that's not really necessarily an absolute true thing. Like, there are kingdoms that are Imperium that shouldn't be Imperium, and this happens all the time. In fact, a very unpopular opinion that seems to now be accepted, but it took years to get there, and there's probably a lot of people that don't, is that you have to zero your dead weight, right? Because otherwise they count toward your matchmaking and then don't do anything. So it's the meta in Rise of Kingdoms. I love this game, actually. It's very fun for me. I do enjoy it. However, doing any of these things, whether you look at, hey, I need more farm accounts to fill garrisons with, or get myself resources from, or maybe I'm going to play a little bit more this KVK, or, you know, gosh, like maybe I will amp up what I need to do to be a rally or garrison, or maybe I realize like, that's an unobtainable objective for me now. Like, whatever these things are, if you want to compete more intensely, push on those things for the direction of your kingdom. If you aren't willing to push on those things, consider a smaller KVK bracket. And quite frankly, like, I think Q dodging larger kingdoms is kind of lame, but I also think that, like, when we look at the experience the G4s, that's the group of 4 kingdoms had, being in a KVK with 1960 and 1093 and also, you know, 2605, they would probably say that this is not necessarily the KVK they envisioned fighting in, or the way they envisioned they would participate in this KVK, with it being a free-for-all, all right? So for those that didn't have the context, these camps over here each have 4 kingdoms in them. And, I mean, while that's a lot of players, it's still not really even comparable to 1093 or 1960, as an example, all right? Now, what I would love to see with the game in the future at some point is that all the high power kingdoms only fight other high power kingdoms. But that's a very easy thing to say without actually having to do any of the work of understanding what would the implications of that be for the way that the game works. Okay, so like, I don't want to sound like an unfair critic, but you know, like, if I could wave a magic wand and all of the associated problems would be solved, I said years ago I would love to see the big kingdoms all have to fight each other. That's what I think I would like to see that. All right. But if you enjoyed the vid or learned something new, throw a like on here, consider subscribing. You can take or use all or none of these tips. I mean, I'm not going to make more farm accounts. I don't have time for it. I know it's good. I know it's a powerful thing to do, but like, I'm not going to do it, man. I'm not going to do it. But you could. And if you did, it'd be busted. If you want to see some fighting from this KVK, I'll have a few cards in the end screen in just a second. Until next time, you have fun smashing the kingdom.